Okay, let's unpack this. We are embarking on a deep dive today, and honestly, this one could fundamentally change how you understand your own mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our mission really is to get familiar with a kind of specialized vocabulary. The labels, the frameworks that we need to recognize the predictable mistakes we all make every single day when we're
Yeah,
judging things, deciding stuff.
exactly. It's like building a precise language for, well, for cognitive errors.
Yeah.
Think about medicine.
Okay.
A doctor doesn't just say, oh, you feel bad.
Right.
They use specific labels diagnoses that
Yeah.
bundle everything together. The symptoms, the likely causes, what might happen next.
Mhm.
We need exactly that same kind of precision for our psychological slip-ups.
And this vocabulary we're talking about, it centers on these predictable systematic errors, what we call cognitive biases.
That's the term.
And the idea is once you have the label, you can actually spot the error in yourself, which is hard,
Oh, very
but
hard.
in the world around you. And that's the shortcut, isn't it, to being genuinely better informed?
It really is. Take a classic like the halo effect. Most people have heard of it.
Right.
This is that bias where, a positive first impression in one area, maybe someone's really good looking, you're super
Yeah,
confident.
charismatic.
Exactly. That feeling bleeds over into how we judge completely unrelated things, like their competence or how smart they are.
Okay, so picture this. You're in an audience, right? And this handsome, incredibly confident speaker walks out on stage.
Mm-hmm.
You can almost predict right there and then that the audience is probably going to judge whatever they're proposing more favorably than maybe it objectively deserves.
That's the halo effect in action. And
Yeah.
the label itself, halo effect, it doesn't just describe the mistake. It helps you anticipate it.
Right.
You recognize
Yeah.
it, and you understand it comes from a specific mental mechanism. It's not just, random human weirdness.
And that mechanism, that's the core of what we're diving into today, isn't it? These two systems of the mind.
Precisely. System 1, fast, automatic, intuitive.
Mm.
And system 2, slow, effortful, much more deliberate.
Okay, system 1. Let's call it fast thinking, or S1 for short. This is like the automatic engine of your mind.
Constantly running.
Yeah, it's always on, it works effortlessly, and crucially, it's continuous. It's the part of you that generates those immediate impressions, those gut feelings, sudden intentions, emotions.
And look, S1 is indispensable. Honestly, for most of what we do day to day, driving on an empty road, glancing at a headline and feeling something, understanding simple sentences, S1 does a fantastic job.
Sure.
It's models of familiar situations, usually very accurate. It's short-term predictions, generally swift, mostly appropriate.
Hmm.
But here's the kicker.
Mm.
You can't turn it off.
Ah, that's the key, yeah. Try looking at a word, like on this screen right now and not reading it.
Impossible.
You just can't do it. The process is totally automatic, unstoppable. And because it's always running, it sometimes gets ahead of itself, right?
That's its big limitation. S1 is fundamentally a coherence-seeking machine. It wants to build the best possible story it can from whatever information is available right now.
Even if that information is, incomplete or statistically shaky.
Especially then. It doesn't really have much grasp of logic or complex statistics. It just wants a story that makes sense now.
Okay, so what happens when S1 gets stuck? Or when a task needs, real mental muscle?
That's when System 2 kicks in, the effortful operator. Now, S2 is usually kind of coasting, operating in a comfortable low-effort mode, often just sort of monitoring what S1 is up to.
You keep an eye on things.
Yeah. But when S2 gets called into action, then you get real mental work. Deliberate, step-by-step, orderly thinking. S2 is where your self-control lives. It's the mechanism that lets you override a quick S1 impulse.
Like forcing yourself to finish that boring report instead of checking your phone for the 10th time.
Exactly that. That's S2 wrestling control from S1.
And we often forget just how much actual physical strain these S2 tasks cause.
We really do.
If you want a perfect example of S2 working hard, try this right now in your head. Multiply 17 by 24.
Okay, so as soon as you hear that, your S2 retrieves the program.
Yeah.
Right? The steps for multiplication you learned ages ago.
Right.
And it starts executing. But doing that calculation,
Yeah.
it's not automatic at all. It's a genuine strain. You can feel the burden, can't you?
Yeah.
Holding the intermediate numbers.
Yeah, the 7 times 4, carry the 2.
The partial products,
Hmm.
all in your working memory.
Mm.
That's sustained, deliberate, step-by-step mental work. That's slow thinking. That's S2.
And the physical effects are pretty profound. Research shows that as soon as people start tackling a problem like this, their pupils actually dilate. noticeably.
Yeah, it's a direct measure of mental effort. It's fascinating.
And when the mental sprint is done, when they get the answer, which is 408, by the way,
Right.
the pupils immediately shrink back to normal size. And it's not just the eyes. Your blood pressure goes up, your heart rate increases. Your body is literally throwing resources at this mental task.
And we're dwelling on this physical cost because it really highlights the limited capacity of S2. Attention is finite. It's an expensive resource. If we demand intense focus on one thing, we are, functionally, becoming less sensitive to everything else happening around us.
Which brings us neatly to maybe the most famous experiment showing this limit, the invisible gorilla study.
Ah, yes, a classic.
People were asked to watch this short video clip. 2 teams, 3 players each, 1 team in white shirts, 1 in black. And their job was to focus really hard on counting the number of basketball passes made only by the players in white shirts.
And the task is deliberately designed to be difficult.
Yeah.
It demands pretty much all your S2 capacity. Now, halfway through this short video, a woman dressed in a full-body gorilla suit walks right into the middle of the players, faces the camera, thumbs her chest, and she's on screen for a full 9 seconds before walking off.
9 seconds. And the result, even knowing it now, it's still staggering. Roughly half of the thousands of people who've done this task completely fail to see the gorilla.
They don't see it at all.
It's not that they weren't looking in the right direction. They just didn't see it because all their cognitive resources were tied up in counting those passes.
And the insight here, it's really twofold. And both parts are critical for you, the listener, to grasp. First, obvious point. We can be blind to the obvious, even something startlingly obvious, when we're intensely focused.
Okay.
Second, and this is almost more disturbing, the people who missed the gorilla. Initially, they were absolutely certain it wasn't there. They'd swear to it.
Wow.
So we're often blind to our own blindness. We just don't intuitively appreciate how severe our attentional limits actually are.
And the reason S2 lets this happen, lets us miss the gorilla, comes down to something called the law of least effort.
Fundamentally, S2 is lazy. It has to be, given its cost. We naturally conserve our limited mental budget.
So we prefer to conduct our mental lives at the pace of a comfortable walk. We rarely sprint unless we absolutely have to.
That's a great analogy. We avoid mental overload. We break complex tasks down into the easiest possible steps. We use external aids all the time. We write notes, use calculators.
That's just the memory.
Exactly. Rather than forcing our easily overloaded working memory to hold everything, if there are multiple ways to achieve the same goal, we will instinctively gravitate towards the path that demands the least cognitive effort.
It's interesting, though, because not all intense focus feels like grinding effort, does it? There's the opposite, that flow state.
Ah, yes. Csikszentmihalyi's work on flow. People in flow, maybe a writer completely lost in a chapter or a musician nailing a complex solo, they describe this deep concentration, losing all track of time, but it doesn't feel effortful.
So what's the difference between that and the 17 by 24 problem?
In flow, the attention is intense, yes, but the concentration itself feels effortless. That deliberate taxing control of attention, the resource S2 usually manages so carefully, seems to be freed up, allowing all your resources to pour directly into the absorbing activity itself. It's highly efficient, deeply absorbing, and actually feels good, not draining.
But for most mundane, difficult tasks, the default is always conserve energy, always the law of least effort. Okay, let's dig deeper into System 1 now. How it actually creates the world we experience. You called it an associative engine.
Yes, fundamentally.
Yeah.
It seeks coherence. It constructs these instantaneous causal stories by linking ideas together in what you can think of as a spreading cascade of activity.
Spreading cascade. Okay, what does that look like?
Let's take a really simple example. Read these sentences. Fred's parents arrived late. The caterers were expected soon. Fred was angry.
Okay.
Now, without any conscious effort, your System 1 instantly linked the late arrival of the parents, the cause, to Fred's anger. The effect.
Seems obvious.
Right. But you probably didn't even consider that maybe Fred was angry because the caterers were expected soon and maybe he wasn't ready for them. S1 just ignored that possibility. It constructed the most plausible, most coherent causal link it could find immediately using the available information. Poof! It created a reality that just felt true.
And S1 doesn't just deal with abstract ideas, does it? You mentioned embodied cognition.
Yes, this is profound. S1 doesn't treat the conjunction of words or events as just information. It almost treats it as reality. Your cognitive state isn't just in your brain, it's deeply intertwined with your physical state. You think, with your body, in a way.
Which leads us right into the really startling effects of priming.
Oh, priming is fascinating. And a bit scary.
It shows that our actions, our thoughts, even our feelings can be nudged by things we aren't even consciously aware of. The sources detail that classic elderly prime experiment.
Right. So in this study, they got young university students and gave them a task unscrambling words to form sentences. Pretty standard stuff.
Okay.
But for one group, hidden within the words they were unscrambling were words subtly related to the concept of old age. Things like bald, gray, wrinkle, Florida. Crucially, the students didn't consciously notice a theme. They just did the task.
But then what happened?
The measurement happened immediately after the sentence task. As the students left the room, the researchers secretly timed how long it took them to walk down the hallway. And the students who had been unconsciously primed with those old age words walked down the hallway significantly measurably more slowly than the control group who got neutral words.
Wow. Just the idea of slowness, activated unconsciously.
Translated directly into physical behavior. Embodied cognition in action.
And this isn't just about walking speed. This priming effect is powerful enough to influence really significant choices, right? Even political ones.
Absolutely. Studies have shown, for instance, that support for a ballot measure to increase school funding was significantly higher when the voting took place inside a school building.
Compared to a nearby neutral location.
Yeah, exactly. And even more subtly, just being exposed to images associated with schools, pictures of classrooms, lockers had the same priming effect. It nudged people towards supporting school funding.
Well, it's almost alarming, isn't it, that such a trivial tweak of the context, seeing a locker, walking past a gym, could actually sway an undecided voter?
The sources suggest the effect of these fleeting images was sometimes even stronger than the difference you'd normally see between, say, parents voting on school funding versus non-parents.
So, minor context can literally override core demographics, just by activating relevant concepts in S1.
It seems so. Context is incredibly powerful, which leads us to cognitive ease.
Okay, what's that?
Cognitive ease is that smooth, comfortable mental state S1 enjoys when everything feels familiar, fluent, and good. When you're experiencing cognitive ease, you're usually in a decent mood. You tend to trust your gut feelings, your intuitions.
Sounds nice.
It is nice, but there's a downside. When S1 feels comfortable and everything seems easy, S2 tends to stay lazy.
So you become more casual, maybe more superficial in your thinking.
Precisely. You don't double-check as much. And this is fertile ground for illusions of truth.
Illusions of truth.
Yeah. For example, numerous studies show that statements are judged as more insightful, more accurate, more truthful, if they rhyme.
Just because they rhyme.
Just because they rhyme. The smooth fluency of the rhyme creates cognitive ease, and S1 misinterprets that ease as a signal of coherence and therefore truth. Woes unite foes sounds wiser than troubles unite enemies.
That's wild. And this S2 laziness, it means we actively try to avoid mental friction, right? You mentioned company names.
Yes, this shows up even in high-stakes places like the stock market. Companies with names that are easy to pronounce, fluid names like, say, Artan, were judged more favorably by investors initially.
And their stocks actually did better.
Their stocks performed better in the first few weeks after going public, compared to companies with awkward, tongue-twisting names like Tahat.
Seriously.
Seriously. The sheer difficulty of pronouncing the name acts as a tiny bit of mental friction, a negative signal, and S2 avoids it. It prefers the easy path.
And our mood plays into this directly, too.
Big time. If you're put in a good mood, maybe by recalling a happy memory or seeing something funny, you measurably increase your reliance on System 1.
Which can boost creativity, intuition. That sounds good.
It can be, but it also makes you demonstrably more likely to make simple logical errors. You're less vigilant.
Okay, and the opposite. If you're in a bad mood?
An unhappy mood, or even just feeling strained or vigilant, acts like a threat signal. It forces S2 to wake up and pay attention.
So you become more analytical.
More analytical, more suspicious, less prone to intuitive errors. But here's a fascinating twist. Researchers found that unhappy subjects, forced into that S2 state of high alert, became completely incapable of accurately performing certain tasks that rely on those quick, automatic, intuitive associations.
They lost their intuition.
Effectively, yes. Because S2 was on high alert, constantly questioning and overriding S1's automatic suggestions.
Okay, so S1 is always on, S2 is lazy. How exactly does S1 end up making these predictable mistakes, these biases? You mentioned substitution.
That's the core mechanism, really. When S1 is faced with a difficult question, the target question, it often quickly and automatically, replaces it with an easier question, the heuristic question.
And then it answers the easier one.
Exactly. And crucially, it often doesn't even tell S2 that a swap has happened. You feel like you've answered the hard question, but you actually answered a much simpler one.
Can you give an example?
Sure. A difficult target question might be, how much money should I rationally contribute to help save this particular endangered species? That requires complex calculation, weighing factors.
Right.
S1 substitutes that with an easier heuristic question. How much sadness or anger do I feel when I see a picture of that suffering animal?
Much easier to answer.
Much easier. You answer the emotion question, donate based on that feeling.
No.
But you walk away thinking you made a rational decision about the species' long-term survival prospects.
Okay. And one of the most common substitutions involves the representativeness heuristic, right?
Yeah.
Judging based on stereotypes.
Precisely. We judge the probability that something A belongs to a category B based on how much A resembles or is representative of our stereotype of B.
Let's use that famous Steve example. People are told about Steve. He's described as shy, withdrawn, helpful, but not very interested in people or the real world. He's tidy, needs order, has a passion for detail.
Okay, classic description.
Then you ask, is Steve more likely to be a farmer or a librarian?
And S1 screams a librarian, doesn't it?
Yeah, instantly.
Yeah.
Because the description perfectly matches the librarian stereotype.
It's highly representative. But here's the critical error S1 makes and S2 fails to catch. Ignoring the base rate.
The underlying statistics.
Exactly. In the general population, there are vastly more farmers and salesmen and many other professions than there are male librarians. The statistical base rate is heavily skewed away from librarians.
So even if Steve fits the stereotype perfectly,
The raw probability, based on sheer numbers, suggests he's still far more likely to be a farmer. But S1 ignores that. It's mesmerized by the representative description.
and that failure to consider the base rate shows S2 is asleep at the wheel, basically. It's not monitoring S1's a very convincing suggestion.
That failure of self-monitoring is exactly what the cognitive reflection test, or CRT, is designed to pick up on.
Okay, let's try the most famous CRT question on you, the listener. Take a moment, but really notice your very first intuitive answer. A bat and a ball together cost $1.10. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost?
So what's the answer that immediately jumps out?
For most people, it's 10 cents.
Right. It just feels right. $1 more than 10 cents is $1.10. Wait, no.
Exactly. It feels right, but it's wrong. If the ball is 10 cents, the bat is $1 more, meaning the bat is $1.10. Add them together, $1.20, not $1.10.
So you need S2 to step in, do the slow sequential algebra.
Yeah.
Let B be the ball's cost. B plus $1, $1.10, two B's are $1.10.
The correct answer is 5 cents. The ball costs 5 cents, the bat costs $1.05, total $1.10.
And the research using the CRT is really compelling. People who consistently blurt out that intuitive wrong answer, 10 cents, are those who demonstrably tend to go with the first idea that pops into their head.
They score lower on measures of, what?
Patience. Deliberation. Exactly. They tend to be characterized as more impulsive, more impatient, maybe more keen on immediate gratification. They're following that law of least effort, letting S1's easy but wrong answer win.
Okay, another major shortcut. The availability heuristic.
Availability. This one is huge in everyday life. We judge how frequent something is or how probable an event is based purely on how easily examples or instances come to mind.
So if retrieving examples is easy, fluent, vivid,
S1 concludes the category must be large, or the event must be highly probable, even if statistically it's not.
and this causes problems at home and at work. You mentioned conflict.
Oh, absolutely. Think about shared living situations like marriages or collaborative work projects. Researchers ask both partners or all team members individually, what percentage of the housework do you do? Or what percentage of the credit for this project's success do you deserve?
Uh-oh. I can see where this is going.
Predictably, almost everyone remembers their own contributions, their own efforts, their own sacrifices much more clearly, much more vividly than they remember what the other person did.
Our memory retrieval is biased towards ourselves.
Totally. So when you add up the percentages each person claims,
It almost always adds up to way more than 100%.
way more, leading to feelings of being unappreciated, resentment, arguments.
Is there a fix?
Well, the simple, wonderful remedy suggested in the sources, if you find yourself in that kind of argument about who did more, just acknowledge the bias out loud. Simply knowing and saying, Look, there's usually more than 100% credit to go around in these situations, can often diffuse things.
Because it reframes it as a normal quirk of memory, not necessarily someone being unfair or lazy.
Exactly, it depersonalizes it.
But availability can scale up, right? Leading to availability cascades.
Yes, especially when the media gets involved. When a particular threat, even a minor one, gets vivid, constant emotional media coverage,
Like a rare disease or a specific type of accident.
public concern can snowball. The vivid examples are readily available in everyone's mind. S1 screens danger, and public anxiety can inflate until it completely distorts rational policy decisions. We focus intensely on the numerator, those tragic, easily recalled stories, and completely forget the denominator, the actual, often tiny, base rate probability of the event. Probability neglect, driven by availability.
Think about the All-R scare with apples years ago.
Perfect example.
Oh.
A very minor potential risk blown into a national panic because the idea was available and scary.
And closely related to this is the affect heuristic, judging based on feelings.
That's it. Often, our judgments and decisions boil down to a very simple S1 question. Do I like it or do I hate it? We let our gut feelings about something guide our beliefs about its risks and benefits.
So if we generally feel good about a technology, say nuclear power,
Then studies show people will start believing the risks associated with it are lower, even if you haven't given them any new data about risk. Just hearing arguments about the benefits makes the risks seem smaller.
the emotional tail wags the rational dog.
Beautifully put. S1 wants a coherent story. Good things that I like have few costs, and bad things that I hate have no benefits. It smooths out the complexities.
Okay, one more heuristic for this section. Anchoring. The power of basically irrelevant numbers.
Anchoring is genuinely unsettling. When we have to make an estimate, say, a price or a probability, we tend to start from whatever initial value is available, the anchor, and then we adjust away from it, but usually insufficiently.
And the anchor doesn't even have to be relevant.
That's the crazy part. Anchors that are obviously random can be just as effective as potentially informative ones. Anchoring works through two routes. S2 makes a deliberate adjustment, but it's lazy and stops too soon. And S1 treats the anchor number itself as a prime, subtly influencing subsequent thoughts towards that magnitude.
The sources mention using Social Security numbers.
Yeah, asking people to consider the last digits of their Social Security number before estimating, say, the number of doctors in Manhattan. Logically absurd, but it still influences the estimate.
But the most disturbing example involved actual judges.
Oh, the German judges study. Yes. Highly experienced judges, average 15 years on the bench. They read the details of a shoplifting case.
Okay. Standard procedure.
But before deciding on a sentence, they were asked to roll a pair of dice. Now, these dice were secretly loaded to land only on a 3, a low anchor, or a 9, a high anchor.
A random roll.
Completely random. Then they were asked a throwaway question. Would you sentence the shoplifter to more or fewer months in prison than the number showing on the dice? And then they gave their actual sentence.
And the result? Please tell me it didn't affect them.
It affected them massively. The judges who rolled a 9, the high anchor, gave an average sentence of 8 months.
Okay.
The judges who rolled a 3, the low anchor, they gave an average sentence of only 5 months.
That's a huge difference from a random dice roll.
A 50% difference in sentencing, anchored by a number they knew was completely arbitrary. It shows just how powerful these anchors are and how hard it is for S2, even inexperienced professionals, to escape their pull. That initial number just sticks in the mind.
It seems our brains are just wired to pay way more attention to the content of a message, the story, than to how reliable the source is or how much data it's based on.
That's a fundamental bias.
Yeah.
Which leads us straight to the law of small numbers, meaning System 1 is just, frankly, inept when dealing with purely statistical facts. It craves causes, narratives. It doesn't intuitively grasp the quirky nature of random sampling.
Okay, give me an example.
Consider that startling map showing kidney cancer rates across U.S. counties. Researchers found something odd. The counties with the very lowest cancer rates and the counties with the very highest cancer rates weren't the big industrial cities or polluted areas. They were disproportionately found in rural, sparsely populated counties, mostly in the Midwest, Great Plains.
Huh. So S1 jumps in immediately, right? For the low rates. Clean living, fresh air, less stress.
Exactly. And for the high rates, must be poverty, poor diet, maybe some specific pesticide runoff.
Yeah.
We impose causal stories onto the pattern.
But the real reason
It's purely statistical. It has nothing to do with specific causes in those counties. Extreme outcomes, both very high and very low rates, are just statistically much more likely to happen in small samples,
Hmm.
like sparsely populated counties, than in large samples, like big cities.
It's like flipping a coin. If you flip it only 4 times, small sample, getting all heads or all tails isn't that surprising. But if you flip it 1,000 times, large sample, getting all heads is virtually impossible.
Precisely. Small samples yield extreme results more often, just by chance. But that's statistical reality. It's completely invisible to our story-loving S1. We insist on finding causes for random fluctuations.
And any causal explanation we invent for these chance events is basically guaranteed to be wrong.
Inevitably wrong. Yet we can't help ourselves. And this same sense-making, narrative-building drive is what powers hindsight bias.
The classic I knew it all along effect.
That's the one. Our mind is fundamentally a sense-making organ. Once an unexpected event happens, maybe a surprising election result, a market crash, a company going bust, our brain instantly rewrites the past to make that event seem like it was predictable, even inevitable, after the fact.
The sources mention that survey about Nixon's visit to China.
Perfect example. Before the historic visit, people were asked to estimate the probability of various potential outcomes. Then, after the visit, they were surveyed again. If an event had actually occurred during the visit, people reliably exaggerated the probability they claimed to have assigned to it beforehand. Oh yeah, I thought that was pretty likely. And for things that didn't happen, they recalled thinking those were unlikely all along. We revise history in our own minds to match the outcome.
Which creates this dangerous illusion, doesn't it? That the world is more knowable, more predictable than it actually is.
Absolutely. Even our language reinforces it. We use words like intuition, premonition, I knew it, only for past thoughts that, by chance, turned out to be true. We don't have a word for the dozen intuitions we had that turned out totally wrong.
So it makes the future seem forecastable and maybe raises the bar unfairly for people whose job it is to make predictions?
It does, and this connects directly to the illusion of validity and the illusion of skill.
Meaning our confidence doesn't match our accuracy?
Not even close, often. The confidence people feel in their judgments and predictions depends almost entirely on the internal coherence and ease of the story they can tell themselves,
How well the pieces fit together in their mind.
and much, much less on the actual quality, quantity, or statistical validity of the evidence supporting that story. WISID, again, what you see is all there is. If the story feels good, we feel confident.
And look at financial forecasters, people managing huge amounts of money.
The evidence is brutal. Studies show, for example, that the forecasts made by chief financial officers of major corporations about the S&P 500 index have virtually zero correlation with the actual future value. Zero.
Yet their confidence remains sky high.
Absolutely. Because they're exercising genuine high-level skills, reading reports, building complex models, analyzing trends. The process feels skillful and coherent.
But the environment, the stock market, is just too noisy, too complex, too driven by unpredictable events and the actions of millions of others for those skills to translate into accurate predictions.
Exactly. The skill is real. The validity of the predictions is illusory.
That Army officer training experiment you mentioned earlier really drives this home about S2 failing to override S1 certainty.
Oh, it's a killer example. Interviewers used rigorous, detailed procedures to predict which cadets would succeed in officer training. They built these rich, coherent, seemingly insightful stories about each candidate's potential.
And statistically.
Statistically, the predictions were largely useless. They were barely better than chance at identifying future leaders.
Okay, but here's the kicker you mentioned.
The critical finding was this. Knowing the general statistical rule, knowing that their predictions, on average, were worthless, had absolutely no effect on the confidence they felt when evaluating the next individual candidate.
Wow.
The specific, compelling, coherent story they built about that one individual completely drowned out the inconvenient statistical base rate about their overall track record. S1's compelling narrative won, S2's statistical knowledge was ignored.
Which is why simple statistical algorithms often blow away expert human judgment, especially in these low-validity environments where outcomes are hard to predict.
Algorithms are superior for usually two main reasons. First, they can be programmed to pick up on weakly valid cues that a human expert looking for a richer story might ignore or dismiss.
Okay.
Second, and this is crucial, algorithms apply those cues consistently, every single time. They don't get tired, bored, distracted, or influenced by whether they like the last candidate. They don't introduce noise.
Like the APGAR score for newborns, a simple checklist.
Perfect example. A simple, 5-point checklist that replaced subjective, experienced clinical judgment about infant health right after birth. It's objective, consistent, and has saved countless lives by ensuring crucial warning signs aren't missed.
Or that slightly amusing algorithm for marital stability you mentioned.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Based on extensive research, a simple formula. Track the frequency of lovemaking and subtract the frequency of quarrels. That simple calculation turned out to be a surprisingly robust predictor of whether a couple would stay together.
Better than hours of couples therapy trying to get a nuanced prediction.
Often, yes. Simple, consistent metrics can beat complex, noisy human judgment when predictability is low.
So how do we fight these illusions, especially in organizations where big decisions are made? You mentioned the planning fallacy.
Yes, the planning fallacy is huge. It's our pervasive tendency to be unrealistically optimistic, to base plans on best-case scenarios, assuming everything will go smoothly.
And this comes from taking the inside view.
Exactly. The inside view means you focus narrowly on the specifics of your current plan. Your amazing team, your unique advantages, your specific hurdles, which you assume you'll overcome. You build this beautiful, compelling S1 narrative of inevitable success.
And you ignore.
You ignore the outside view. The outside view means deliberately stepping back, ignoring the seductive details of your own situation, and asking, what happened when other people tried to do something similar? You consult the statistics of comparable cases.
So instead of how long will our specific project take,
Right.
you ask, how long do projects like this, undertaken by organizations like ours, typically take?
Precisely. You look for the relevant reference class and its statistics the base rate. This might be the single most important piece of advice for improving forecasts and plans. Force yourself or your team to take the outside view. It forces S2 to engage with the cold, hard statistical reality, bursting S1's optimistic bubble.
And there's a technique to encourage this in groups, the pre-mortem.
Yes, a brilliant idea from psychologist Gary Klein. The pre-mortem tackles the problem that once a plan starts gaining momentum, it's really hard for individuals to voice doubts. Groupthink sets in.
So what do you do?
Before the final decision to commit to a major plan is made, you gather the key people involved, and you say, okay, imagine it's 1 year from now. The plan has been implemented, and it was a complete, unmitigated disaster. Spend the next 15 minutes writing a brief history of that disaster, what went wrong.
Ah, so you're making it safe to be critical.
Exactly. It temporarily legitimizes doubt and pessimism. It breaks the illusion of inevitable success and collective S1 coherence that naturally forms around an exciting plan. It encourages S2 thinking by forcing everyone to actively search for potential flaws, overlooked risks, and hidden assumptions that the initial optimism might have suppressed.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. When we start talking about happiness, well-being, making choices, the sources argue we have to recognize we're often dealing with two different selves inside us.
That's right. The experiencing self versus the remembering self.
What's the difference?
The experiencing self is the one who lives life moment by moment. It's the part of you asking, does it hurt right now? Or how happy am I in this instant? It lives in the present.
Okay, and the remembering self.
The remembering self is more like the storyteller, the scorekeeper. It's the one that looks back and asks, how was that vacation on the whole, or was that a good experience? And crucially, the remembering self is the one that makes decisions about the future.
And the fundamental problem here is?
The remembering self is, frankly, a terrible historian of our actual experience. It's subject to some major biases, primarily the peak end rule and duration neglect.
Peak end and duration neglect. Okay, break those down.
When the remembering self looks back on an experience, whether it was painful or pleasurable, its overall rating isn't based on the sum total of feeling over time. Instead, it's dominated by just 2 points in time. The feeling at the most intense moment, the peak, and the feeling right at the very end.
And duration neglect.
And it almost completely ignores how long the experience actually lasted. The duration just doesn't seem to factor into the overall memory rating.
That seems incredibly counterintuitive.
It is. But it's demonstrated powerfully in experiments like the cold hand experiment.
Right. Tell us about that one.
Participants had to endure putting their hand in painfully cold water. They did 2 different trials. Trial A, hand in 57-degree Fahrenheit water for 60 seconds straight. Pretty unpleasant.
Okay.
Trial B. They endured the exact same 60 seconds at 57 degrees, but then immediately after, they kept their hand in the water for an extra 30 seconds, during which the temperature was slightly raised to 59 degrees. Still cold, still unpleasant, but slightly less painful than the initial 57 degrees.
So trial B was objectively worse, right? Same amount of peak pain, But 30 seconds longer overall duration of discomfort.
Logically, yes.
Mm.
More total pain integrated over time.
Mm.
But when participants were later asked which trial they would prefer to repeat,
They chose the longer one, trial B.
a significant majority chose to repeat trial B, the longer, objectively more painful experience.
Why on earth would they do that?
Because trial B had a slightly less unpleasant end. The peak pain was the same in both, but the end point of trial B felt slightly better than the abrupt end of trial A. The remembering self, governed by the peak end rule, formed a less negative memory of the longer trial.
And the remembering self is the one making the choice for the future.
Exactly. It chooses the option that it remembers as less bad, even though the experiencing self actually suffered more. It prioritizes future memory over future experience. It's a fundamental decision-making mistake, driven by the quirks of the remembering self.
Wow. And this flawed remembering self leads us directly into prospect theory, which really turned traditional economics on its head.
Absolutely. Classical economics assumed people make choices based on the final outcome, the final state of their wealth.
Yeah.
Bernoulli's idea. Prospect theory, developed by Kahneman and Tversky, showed that's just not how humans work.
How do we work then?
We evaluate outcomes based on gains and losses relative to some kind of reference point, often our current state. Not based on absolute levels of wealth. It's the change that matters, not the final amount.
And the central finding here is loss aversion.
Yes, losses loom larger than gains. The pain you feel from losing a certain amount of money, say $100, is psychologically much more powerful, about twice as powerful, according to studies, than the pleasure you feel from gaining the exact same amount.
Losing $100 hurts roughly twice as much as gaining $100 feels good.
That's the general finding. And this loss aversion is a really powerful conservative force in our lives. It makes us favor the status quo.
How so?
It explains things like the endowment effect. Why are we so reluctant to sell things we already own, like those old baseball cards in the attic or a stock we bought that hasn't done well?
Even if someone offers us a fair market price.
Even then. Because selling it feels like a loss of the object, and the pain of that loss outweighs the pleasure we'd get from the equivalent gain in cash, we're biased towards keeping what we have.
And this sensitivity to gains versus losses makes us really vulnerable to framing effects, right? How choices are presented.
Hugely vulnerable. You can take the exact same objective outcome, frame it differently, once as a gain, once as a loss relative to a reference point, and people's choices will completely reverse.
Give us the classic example, medical treatments.
Right. Imagine a serious disease. Treatment A is described as guarantees a 90% survival rate. Treatment B is described as guarantees a 10% mortality rate.
Logically, identical outcomes. 90% survive, 10% die.
Identical. But when you present these options, even to experienced doctors, let alone patients, they overwhelmingly prefer treatment A, the one framed in terms of survival, a gain.
So framing it as a gain makes us risk-averse. We want the sure thing.
Generally, yes. When choices are framed in terms of gains, we tend to lock in the sure gain. If you frame the exact same choice in terms of losses, 10% mortality rate, people suddenly become much more willing to take risks to avoid that certain loss.
They become risk-seeking when faced with losses.
Often, yes. They might gamble on a riskier treatment that offers a chance of avoiding mortality altogether, even if it also carries a risk of a worse outcome. The framing flips the preference.
And finally, within this economic sphere, we see emotion really overriding rational calculation with taboo trade-offs.
Yes, this is that intense, often moral aversion people have to explicitly trading safety or sacred values for money or convenience.
Like parents thinking about child safety products.
Yeah, it's a prime example. Many parents feel deeply uncomfortable, even morally repulsed, by the idea of accepting even a tiny, statistically negligible increase in risk for their child, say, by choosing a slightly cheaper but demonstrably safe car seat over a marginally safer but much more expensive one.
It feels wrong to put a price on safety.
Exactly. And the source argues this resistance often isn't driven by a careful calculation of the actual risk levels, which might be incredibly tiny in both cases. It's motivated more by an overwhelming fear of future regret and blame.
The horrifying counterfactual.
Yes. S1 recoils violently from the potential future thought. What if the worst happens? I'll never forgive myself. If only I had spent the extra money. The anticipated pain of that potential regret paralyzes the ability to make a rational trade-off based on the actual probabilities involved. #outro.
So we've covered a huge amount of ground here. The big takeaway seems to be We are definitely humans with all their quirks and biases, not the perfectly rational econs that old school economics imagine.
Not even close. And the very strength of our system one, its incredible speed, its ability to weave a coherent story out of whatever scraps of information are lying around,
Mm,
what Kahneman calls what you see is all there is, or WISIety.
right.
That very strength is also the precise source of so many of our predictable systematic biases. The coherence comes at the cost of ignoring what we don't see.
But these insights aren't just, interesting facts about the mind. They have real-world applications, don't they? This understanding is behind things like the nudge concept.
Exactly. The idea of libertarian paternalism, which Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein wrote about extensively, using these psychological insights to design environments choice architecture that gently nudge people towards making better decisions for themselves without restricting their ultimate freedom of choice.
And the classic example of a nudge is using defaults wisely.
That's probably the most powerful one.
Mm.
Think about company pension plans. Instead of making employees actively sign up, opt in, you automatically enroll them, but give them the easy option to opt out if they really want to.
What happens?
Enrollment rates skyrocket because it aligns the inherent laziness of System 2, which prefers sticking with the default, the path of least effort, with the individual's own long-term financial well-being. It respects choice, but it leverages our predictable cognitive flow for good.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, we wanted to leave you, the listener, with one final, maybe provocative thought to chew on, especially if you're involved in planning, starting a business, any kind of competitive field. It's about the dangerous mix of competition neglect and the illusion of control.
Yes. Think about when experts or entrepreneurs or even studio executives are making big plans for a new venture. They focus intensely, understandably, on their own efforts, their unique skills, their resources, their brilliant strategy.
The inside view again.
Totally. They often estimate that their success is overwhelmingly determined by their own actions, maybe 80% or more down to their execution.
Yeah.
They feel their fate is largely in their own hands. That's the illusion of control, fueled by WISIety.
But in that intensely focused, coherent narrative about their own brilliance, what are they neglecting?
They're neglecting, or at least drastically underestimating, two massive external factors. First, the plans, skills, and resources of their equally smart, equally motivated competitors who are also planning to win.
Right, competition neglect.
And second, they neglect the undeniable, often decisive role of sheer random chance. Luck, unforeseen events, market shifts, fortunate or unfortunate timing.
So the challenge for you, the listener, moving forward from this,
Is to constantly try to mobilize your lazy system too. Force it to look beyond your immediate, compelling internal story. Actively search for the missing information, the base rates you're ignoring, the competitor analysis you haven't done, the role of randomness you dismissed.
and maybe most importantly,
To really internalize deep down just how often luck, not just skill, drives outcomes in a complex world full of equally skilled and determined players. Truly appreciating that requires defeating that seductive, pervasive illusion of control.